What is up, you lovely listener? Welcome to another episode of Oversharing. Our guest today is a psychotherapist and mental health professional who's passionate about evidence-based mental health care, relationships, and overall wellness. She specializes in working with adolescents, young adults, and distressed couples. And she also helps individuals with women's issues, painful family situations, difficulty managing emotions, relationship distress, the effects of trauma, substance abuse, and attachment injuries. I'm really excited to have this conversation today because everybody's trying to just keep it together while there's so much chaos going on in the world. But before I speak too much, let's allow Dr. Natalie Zaragoza to overshare. How you doing, Natalie?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. Do you mind if I call you Natalie, or should I do Dr. Zaragoza?
Oh, please call me Natalie.
All right, sounds good. So I'm really excited about this. This is actually our second interview together for the listener who didn't check into the last one. And for those who don't really know you yet, I love starting these podcasts and these interviews with what you were like in high school. So can you give us a little bit of a deep dive into the life of Dr. Natalie Zaragoza?
Yeah, oh my gosh, how the tables have turned. Now you're wanting to know about my history and background when normally I'm the one that's asking people that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so oh my gosh, what was I like in high school? So I've thought about this question and because I get it sometimes. And I'd love to give you an honest answer. I think, I was probably, in terms of personality style, I was probably friendly, outgoing, somewhat extroverted for sure. I did enjoy school, but I didn't apply myself probably as much as I could have, which I think is probably a lot of us. But I never, to be totally honest, I never totally felt like I fit in. And that was an internal experience. Like, I don't think anybody probably picked up on that because I always, had friends and always did stuff. And I don't think anybody might have noticed that, but it's been an internal thing for me for a long time. And later in my life, as I've gone through, my own therapy and things like that, I've actually found out that I'm kind of a little bit more introverted than I thought I was. And I think that that's actually common because sometimes people, a lot of the being, friendly and super nice and wanting to have a lot of friends, sometimes it's about us feeling like self-conscious, and like wanting validation from other people. And so I kind of had like a life change. I was like, whoa, I think I'm actually more introverted. So that was an interesting, experience for me to kind of realize.
When did you come to that realization?
In graduate school.
How did that manifest, and why did you start to feel like you were a little bit more introverted?
So it was actually a professor of mine had kind of pointed it out because it was an experience that she had. And I think she could sense that I was struggling a little bit in terms of our cohort was very small. I was only a handful of people, and I was feeling a little bit lonely and a little bit disconnected. And we ended up kind of talking in her office. And it's kind of a funny story. I thought that she actually didn't like me very much. And I always just had this experience. And come to find out, she's just actually very introverted. So she doesn't, kind of go out of her way to come off as overly nice. And we ended up having this really good discussion in her office. And she said, I kind of see a little bit of myself in you. And that was kind of, she said, I never felt like I had my tribe in school or in college. And I was like, yeah, I haven't really either. And I have some really, really good friends now. But in terms of my earlier years, that was something that I really, really struggled with. And now finding out that I'm more introverted, I think I just really need a couple people that I'm close with. I no longer need that huge group of people.
That's really interesting that you're saying that too, because as I grow a little bit older, I start to feel like I'm a little like that as well. But what's the classification between like an introvert and an extrovert? Because I think, there's a lot of memes on social media about what it is to be introverted and extroverted. And now I'm confused because for some reason, pop culture psychotherapy is like, I'm like, oh, am I an introvert or extrovert? I have no idea.
You know what? I'm with you. I think that there's probably a lot of misunderstanding. And I think a lot of us that are probably thinking that we're extrovert are actually more introverted. But it really looks like a lot of different things in terms of like the way, like our thinking style. if we feel extroverted people tend to feel more fulfilled and energized by being around people, being in social environments, or introverts tend to, it's kind of the opposite. They tend to feel more energized when they spend alone time, whether, it's reading or hiking or things like that. And sometimes really, really intense social environments kind of exhaust them. And so they have to recharge. And it can also be kind of a difference between, more thinking, more feeling. So there can be a lot of different kind of aspects to that, but that's kind of the general difference.
Is there such thing as an omnivert?
Or an ambivert when
And
you're kind of both.
that works.
Yeah, I think that's the right word. My psychologist friends are probably going to be mad at me if I got that wrong. Yeah, I think so. I don't know about it being like a clinical classification, but that's probably more where I fall. I probably am more in the middle.
All right, cool. I kind of feel the same way. So you mentioned that in high school you didn't really find your tribe, and you didn't feel like you were really connected to anyone. When you go back and like kind of think about that, why do you feel like you weren't having those connections with people through high school?
I think that's such a great question. And it's something that I reflect on here and there throughout my life. Talked about it with my boyfriend. I've talked about it with friends. I've talked about it with my therapist. Um, I was always like a huge feeler. I was always having all of these kind of internal experiences. I was a big reader, and so I would always feel, a lot of empathy for characters that I was reading, and I would be really bothered by things that would like happen in the world,
Mhm.
and I'd be really affected by them. And not that nobody else felt that way, but nobody was like engaging with me like that. And it, I struggled with like having a best friend, like that one person that you're closer with than everybody else. Um, I struggled with having somebody that I felt like really understood me. I also grew up in a very small, very, very conservative Western community. They're both, socially and politically conservative, where I've always leaned more toward being socially, kind of liberal and progressive. And even before I had those labels, I always knew that I just kind of thought a little bit differently. And anything, now as I'm older, I'm comfortable with that. But when you're a kid, anything that makes you feel different, it just really kind of like weighs
Mhm.
on you. I didn't have a lot of like Hispanic friends, and so there was just kind of different things that I felt like made me feel like kind of a bit of an outsider.
As you started to like kind of grow into yourself and understand that more, how did you start to build a tribe for yourself? And I know this wasn't in the outline that I sent you, but I think it's really important. And to be very honest, I think, even for myself, sometimes I feel like people don't get where I'm coming from. I tend to be in my feelings and my thoughts a lot, and it's very rare that I'm able to connect with somebody, maybe on an emotional and intellectual level, because I don't know, I don't find the same interests as a lot of males my age, I feel like. And now I think as I put more of that energy out, people get attracted to that, and I find that more, but that didn't really happen until the last 2 years, and I'm 33, right? So how did you start to build a tribe for yourself and, in a close group of friends?
Yeah, and that takes vulnerability, like you said. You're putting more of that energy out, and so you're getting some more of those authentic connections. That's the more vulnerable way to go. Because sometimes we want other people to come toward us first because that feels safer.
Mhm.
And so I can really relate to that. Again, I think me feeling different was super internal, and I never talked about it. I never talked about it until I got older. Um, so in terms of, you asked me, how did I find my tribe? Um, I I think it was a mixture of my own probably growth and like maturity, and finding out what I needed. Like I used to get, as somebody who like identified as more of an extrovert, I used to get really bad FOMO. And that's not not a clinical word, but it's real, right? It's like a real experience of, I want all of these, I had a house party and I wanted all of these people to come that had been in my life. And things like that. And then it just never felt like quite aligned for me. Like, I feel like I should want these things, but then I'm not exactly sure, why, or some part of it doesn't really fit. And so a lot of it was just kind of talking it out. Like, you know what, I have some really close friends right now. I don't need anybody else. I have a few people. I'm very close with my cousins. I'm very close with my sister and my family. My boyfriend and I really understand each other, and like that's good enough for me. But I think it's the pressure of like, I should have this big, huge social group. I should be busy all the time. I should be posting all these like great photos on Instagram of me going to like these parties and things like that. And I'm getting more comfortable with feeling like, that's not what my life looks like, and that's okay. I'm comfortable with that.
Hmm. That's interesting that you say that, because over the last 3 or 4 weeks or so, as we've all been kind of self-quarantined in order to stay inside, I start to realize that about myself as well, where I usually like to throw big parties and, make sure that a lot of people are there. One very recent thing is my fiance and I were going to have a wedding with over 200 people that were supposed to come to Mexico. And we were really excited about that. And we felt like we needed that. But then once all of that is stripped away, we realized that none of that was really important for us anyways. So that realization for you, I resonate with that a little bit, because I'm starting to find out those things about myself as well. But this podcast is not about me.
Yeah, but you had to reschedule your wedding. And so, I mean, I think that deserves a little bit of airtime, right?
Yeah, we haven't even been able to reschedule it, because we don't know when we're allowed back outside, really. But I want to talk about your practice a little bit. Your
Yeah, of course.
practice is in Orange County, correct?
Yeah, it's in Newport Beach.
That's awesome. So,
Hmm.
I know that we talked about it a little bit in the introductions, but can you dig a little bit deeper into the type of people that you're helping and what you're trying to resolve for those individuals?
Yeah, of course. So I think I'll start off as just kind of position myself as a mental health clinician. So I'm a family therapist. I have a master's and a doctorate in family therapy. And some people maybe have some misunderstandings or misconceptions by that. And I understand, because, we don't talk about mental health professionals very often unless we are one or we see one. But we're really kind of the mental health version of like family practice physician. So they, are trained to see the whole family at all stages, and that's sort of what we do as well. I'm really trained to work with. I have training in children and adolescents, as well as young adults and older adults. And I, really work with relationship systems. So some clinicians and therapists focus more on individuals, and some therapists focus more on relationships. And I tend to focus more on relationships, just by training and also by who I am as a person and who I am as a therapist. We are relational beings. So to be really to have a problem or have an issue, it's usually tied up in a relationship. It means that relationships are difficult for us, or we're feeling disconnected, we're feeling alone. Otherwise, the problems wouldn't probably matter as much to us. But
Mhm.
it's really when they start to affect our relationships do we really, seek help.
Yeah.
So that's kind of broadly, how I see things. I really focus on connection and vulnerability. I love seeing young adults. And that is, I really have seen a lot of adolescents and a lot of young adults in my training and in my practice, and it's really just my favorite population. So I tend to see like college age young women, but I also see young men too, at stages in their life where they are going through differentiation. And what that means is just they're starting to differentiate who they are as individuals, and who other people are as individuals, and what that looks like is finding where you end and somebody else begins, and how am I different and how am I the same and how do I create connection through that.
Wow, it's amazing. So, the word vulnerability comes up a lot now. I feel like definitely pop psychology on social media, and I believe Brene Brown has made this such like a very powerful subject as well too, around vulnerability. What does vulnerability mean to you, and why is that so important in building connections with other people?
Yeah. Yeah, I have a lot of appreciation from Brene Brown because she um, she took her science, right, and her research, and made it like a so friendly and so user friendly and so understandable. And she's like a household name, and that's not that common. Like to be a PhD researcher and to translate it like that, normally your PhD sits in a a library, or your research sits in a whoever, and nobody reads it. And Brene Brown, just like all of her work is we all know it, and I just have a lot of respect for that. So I hope that I can be at that level one day. But in terms of vulnerability, so Brene Brown, she writes about it so much, but she really talks about it being, you really have the courage to be who you are. But that, of course, looks like a lot of different things. I tend to focus on vulnerability in the sense of I have these feelings, I have these experiences, I have these needs, I have these desires, and I'm not willing to own them as mine, right, and not externalize them as yours, but I'm willing to own them as mine, and I'm really willing to talk about them from myself, and I'm okay, and I can tolerate, or I can withstand the fact that you disagree with me, or that you may not like what I have to say or who I am. That's really what vulnerability tends to mean for me and my clients.
So, how have you had to change your practice now that we can't see people in person?
Uh, so we have to do what you and I are doing right now, and we do Zoom. So um, this has been. I wanted to be just like really honest with you in our conversation today, and it's been really hard. So I'm a relational therapist. I love to be in the room with my clients. I like to be face to face with them. I really like to really attune to what it is they're feeling. And so I don't tend to be a telehealth therapist, but that's what this pandemic has required. So my private practice is completely online now. And so we do Zoom, and that's just to protect. I see some older adult clients. There's older therapists at my office, and it's just everybody is out in our building, and that's really the trend in Orange County. Is everybody that's an outpatient is online, and so that's really, I think, the best practice. So that's what I've been doing. Some of my clients have enjoyed it. Some of my more anxious clients and who struggle with some social anxiety, they actually thrive like on Zoom. It's more safe to them. And some of my clients that are a little bit more, wanting a little bit more emotion, it's been hard for them.
Mhm.
And I'm a human too, so I join with them in that. Like, yeah, this is really difficult and it sucks. And I hope that we get to see each other face to face soon.
Yeah. Um, has there been any, without sharing too much about any, obviously you wouldn't share anything about a specific client or patients or anything like that,
Mm-hmm.
but has there been any more common themes around people managing through the pandemic, through the, having to self-isolate or whatever it is? Has there been some common themes that you're having to address over the last couple weeks?
Yeah. Yeah. So unemployment has been a big thing. So unemployment, where the client has been totally laid off, or underemployment, where their hours have gotten cut, or they're on furlough, so they're having to take time off without pay. That's been a big thing for my clients. And so I think that this is important to talk about, because there is a relationship between suicide and unemployment, and we know that from studying different recessions, and mental health, how mental health is affected, and there really is a relationship. So the higher the unemployment, the higher the rate of suicide that we see, and the reverse. So the better that the economy is doing, and the more that people are employed, the less suicide that we see. So it really is hard. It really is hard for people. It can really be traumatic. And I think sometimes people have a reaction to that word, and I can completely understand why. you think of trauma as being in combat, or you think of trauma as being in a really bad car accident. But trauma really looks like so many different things. And for a family where somebody has lost their job and they can no longer provide for their family, and they have to move, the kids have to change schools, they have to move in with their parents, and that creates a relationship strain, and it can be really traumatic for people. So that's something that I want to share and normalize if those that are listening are going through a tough time, whether they've been laid off or they're struggling to put food on the table. It obviously affects people's mental health, and it's very real, and it's something that I'm working with right now.
Do you feel as if, man, that's such a heavy topic, and it's kind of weird, but I guess I'm just going to ask the questions that are coming to mind here. But when people are potentially like contemplating suicide or harming themselves or something of that nature, do you think it's coming, or do you find that it's coming more from a loss of identity when it has to do with them losing their jobs or their careers, or is it more coming from like the overwhelming anxiousness and stress of potentially not being able to provide for their families or for themselves?
Yeah, good question. So when we look at suicide in terms of like there are several different things that can increase or decrease likelihood of suicide. But one thing in terms of a recession, the people that typically commit suicide and that are hit the most are the middle to later age Americans. So people that are like around 50, 45 to 50. And I think we can infer a lot from that, that they have families, or it's really difficult for them to restart a new career. I think it definitely has to do with losing a sense of identity socially and culturally, and in the Western world. A lot of our identity, especially men, is tied up in what they do for work. It's an immense amount of validation that they get, and a role that they have in their life, and to just lose that, and then on top of all of the family strain, I think it just makes it really difficult, and I feel like that has a lot to do with it.
How might one person start to manage some of those feelings of loss of identity in that spot? Because I mean, that's huge. I think about, I often think about what would happen if I had to shut down the doors to my business, because over the last 6 years, it has been such a big part of my identity. So I'm constantly training myself to remind myself that I am not my company or anything like that. But, for you on a practical sense, how do you walk somebody through those feelings of losing identity or some sort of identity crisis?
Oh, thank you for asking that. So we listen first. So the worst thing that people can feel sometimes in therapy, and our therapists, the vast majority of us have good intention and great training, but sometimes we go way too soon into problem solving, and have you tried this, and have you filed for unemployment, and have you looked here, and I know so-and-so that might be hiring. And we totally skip the fact that this is another person that we're sitting across that is sharing a trauma in their life, and losing a sense of their self, and is going through an identity crisis, and we need to listen to that first, and explore that, and really unpack what identity means to them, what their occupation meant to them, allow for the grief stage to happen. And just like sometimes trauma, we put it in a little bit of, we put it in a box. We do the same thing with grief. We think grief is just for when people close to us have died. But when we lose major parts of our life, like a job, for example, it creates a lot of grief, and we have to allow the client to go through the grief stages as well. And then a little bit later, after we've had a relationship with the client and we really understand what this job and what their identity meant to them, can we start to intervene and provide feedback?
So this is such an interesting topic for me because I hate admitting this to you sometimes because, I have certain mindsets that I like to promote and that I truly, truly 100% believe in. And one of the things for me is like a 48-hour rule where you can feel sorry for yourself for 48 hours, but then you got to get to your shit together and keep moving. But from your lens, do you feel as if it's healthy to continue to stay proactive in your career, and uh, in a time where there is so much stress? Like, should somebody continue to move forward and just, be applying to jobs, updating their resume, building a personal brand, or any of these things?
Mhm. Yeah. So I think so if that it works for you, and by all means. But for some people, I think we also have to remember that both can exist at the same time. Like we could be stressed and sad and bummed out and worried, and validate that while at the same time taking steps forward to pursue, a different job options and things like that. Um, so I think that we really have to, it doesn't always look like, it's not black and white. So we really have to allow that person to be affected as they need to be and feel what they need to be. It's tough right now.
Hmm.
It's tough. People are really struggling. They're scared. They're worried. They're losing their jobs. Their loved ones are sick. And so I think it's like a collective, I think Brene Brown said it's like we're collectively vulnerable right now. Everybody feels vulnerable.
Hmm.
And I think that's okay to feel that way, and to also, plan for what's ahead. So I don't think that there's necessarily anything wrong with being in your feelings.
Mm. So I think that it's incredibly valuable and powerful to be able to talk to somebody through any feelings that they have, whether it's anxiousness, depression, loss of identity, anything like that. But for the individual who might not feel comfortable yet talking to somebody or reaching out to somebody for help, whether it's a therapist like yourself or even a family or friend, what are some of the things that they can do on their own to start managing those feelings of, anxiousness, loss of identity, or anything like that?
Yeah. So earlier when your question, when you said, is there anything wrong with like updating your resume and things like that? No, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. And we get so anxious, like work isn't just, um, it doesn't just mean one thing. It's not just economic for people. Like we said, it's also identity and it's also structure. And humans love structure. They thrive on structure. And if you think you don't, you probably do. We do thrive on that. So that's something to think about. And if you are struggling with job loss or underemployment, how to bring some level of structure back in your day. Whether that's waking up at a certain time, making sure that you're showering at your usual time. You're eating 3 meals a day. Um, there's a lot of there's so many. It's been really inspiring to see how quickly everybody adapted to online. There's online group therapy support groups. There's online yoga classes. There's
Mm.
online meditation. Most of them, if not all, are free. And I get it. And we talked about this last time. It's not easy to go to therapy. Even as a therapist, it was hard for me, when I was in college, and pursuing my career. It's not easy. And so now I'm hoping that through all these online platforms, people can feel a little bit safer. I can just click on and see what it's about. And if I don't like it, I can just leave, right? It's kind of
Mm.
not as vulnerable. So I urge, you asked what people could do, that maybe is not as, doesn't feel as risky as scheduling with somebody, but try those things. Click onto a support group online and see if you like it.
Mm. Um, we've all had to shelter in. I don't know if shelter in place is the right term, but definitely like the self quarantine, things like this. We're not hanging out with as many people as possible, as much as we'd like to, and as much as I do enjoy some alone time. I definitely miss the human interaction, the IRL interaction with people, having a beer or whatever it might be. Right. Um, I've been lucky enough to be able to. I live with my fiance, so we have some connection there. But for somebody who might be dealing with senses of isolation, uh, right now? Like, what are some practical things they can do to feel connection again if, maybe text message isn't enough?
Yeah, I think those virtual platforms like Zoom and Doxy and FaceTime, I think they don't quite replace like the one-on-one person-to-person contact. Remember, like we're social, relational beings, and we like to hug and to handshake and to embrace and to be in somebody's presence. And so it's we're not meant to be alone. One of the greatest, the first attachment researchers, Bowlby, said that isolation and loss is inherently traumatizing for us, and a lot of us are isolated right now. And so if just getting on maybe some of those platforms, making calls, checking on your loved ones, that can definitely help with the isolation. And the things that I mentioned earlier, like logging on to some of those online support groups, could also be really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting actually. I will say that through all of this, I have called my family a lot more, and it's actually nice to do that, and calling some old friends and things like and just checking in, seeing how they're doing, and everybody's picking up the phone now. Nobody's ignoring their phone
Yeah,
call.
I
um,
know.
it's such a big deal. Um, you know, I, I don't know how much time you spend online. I do. I spend quite a bit of time online for my job and just whatever. But there's a lot of crap out there. I feel as if, everywhere you turn, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, I think TikTok might be the only place where there isn't news about the coronavirus or things like that. What should how can people, like, I mean, other than just like turning this off, like I personally believe that they need to that someone might need to avoid this type of news often, because it just seems daunting with the way that the media portrays everything that's going on right now. What are your thoughts on, avoiding news or absorbing it? How do you feel like somebody should be managing that?
Yeah. So we want to be informed and stay informed. So, completely shutting it off is probably not realistic, or might not be helpful or healthy for us, because we want to know kind of, what's going on. So I think normalizing that, but there's a difference between that and just constantly being bombarded by, you know, um, news stories and death tolls, and it is stressful. So I think we're all kind of chronically stressed right now because of the context of this pandemic. I think you'd be, hard pressed to find somebody that's not affected by it. And we don't know how long this is going to go. Like, we don't know. There's not an end date to our kind of chronic stress, which makes it even more stressful. And when we're stressed, our autonomic nervous system kicks on, and our sympathetic nervous system of our kicks on, and that's what makes us have anxiety. And we there's several different things that we could do to like ground ourselves. But one is, every time we get like a notification or a news article pops up, our nervous system gets activated. So being kind of mindful of how often you do that. So maybe you do it once in the morning and maybe once in the evening. I would discourage people from maybe doing it before they go to bed, because you want to avoid anything that activates you right before you fall asleep. And so that's like news or horror movies, video games, things like that. Anything that stresses us, we want to try to not do right before we go to sleep.
Mm.
So really, I think it goes down to just minimizing it to an as needed, and also more of those reliable sources, like stay on the CDC and the World Health Organization, where they're just going to state facts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are trustworthy scientists, researchers, and physicians that provide us up-to-date information. Those are the people that we should be logging on to look at what they have to say.
So we shouldn't be listening to our friend who has a friend who has a friend in the military and CIA who says that XYZ is going to happen. It seems like everybody has a friend in the CIA somehow right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't, but I'm sure I probably know somebody that thinks I do. But yeah, like, and I think when you're a therapist, it's like so funny because I think you can, my threshold for like, I can take a step back and be like, okay, like I can see how you got there,
Hmm.
because we're just trying to freaking survive. That's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to live. And people do different kinds of things to ensure that. And for some people, it's avoiding and it's like, this isn't happening. This is a hoax, right? Or this isn't real, or this is all the media, right? And it's, I think those are people that that's what they do to get by. And I guess I can understand that. But yeah, getting away from the sensationalism and honestly the memes are kind of
Hmm.
a problem. So I've kind of, I stay away from those. I don't post them. I think to be honest, I think it trivializes the situation. This isn't a meme, right? This is a pandemic. People are dying. Our healthcare professionals are overwhelmed. They're putting themselves at risk. They're dying. There's millions of people that are unemployed, and I really don't. I'm really not into the meme situation. So.
Mm. Yeah, that's big. What should before I get into this, it's interesting that you said like don't, try not to get into these news articles or whatever right before you go to bed. On a very practical sense, I've watched this show called Ozark. Are you familiar with it?
Yes, my boyfriend and I watched that a couple weeks ago. We started. I love
Yeah, it's awesome. However, I cannot watch that show before going to
it.
bed. I'll
Yeah.
I'll get like through 3 episodes and I'm like, oh my gosh, Alexa and I both are like, dude, I kind of feel terrible right now. So it's like we'll have to have like some sort of comedy on in the background as we're falling asleep or something like that, just to like uplift our mood again because that show gets pretty dark and stressful.
Yeah. Again, so anything that's activating, so anything that like, thrillers or anything that's kind of gory or keeps you on the edge or things like that, we want to avoid those like 2 hours before we go to bed. So
Mhm.
Ozark is maybe something more like an afternoon or a morning watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Yeah.
what should people be getting more of? And maybe not just content. I mean, I think it's easy to maybe say like read a book, journal, whatever it is, but what can people like surround themselves around to really feel like uplifted or maybe relieve some of the senses of anxiety that they're getting right now?
Mhm. Yeah, so I think so. There's a couple things. I think what I said earlier about trying to create a structure for yourself because it's really stressful for us as humans to not have a level of structure. For those of us that typically have non-remote based jobs, to all of a sudden be working from home is hard because the boundary of leaving work and then walking into the door, putting your stuff down, and now you're at home, and now you're playing with the kids, or now you're going on a date, or you're watching Netflix. The boundaries are all blurred, and so I think it helps our brain and our body to feel safer when we have some structure. So I think that's
Hmm.
a big thing. Not feeling pressure to be not feeling pressure to feel like we have to perform at the level that we were pre-pandemic, and some people even feel like they should be more productive just because of the state of everything.
Mm.
Are you cringing because that's totally you?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Hey, that's me too, right? So I
Hmm.
have to like back it up a little bit. And we just have to do the best that we can, and so some of my clients are really talking to me about how stressed they feel because they're not feeling as productive at work, or they feel like they should be doing something or doing more, starting a project, or and those things can be great, right, if they don't create more stress for you or more shame, right?
Mm.
And shame is that self-criticism, that really really negative self-talk that we have, that we should be better, we should be more, we're not enough, we're not good looking enough, we're not skinny enough, we're stupid, or those sorts of things. If it's creating a lot of shame for you because you're not operating at 120%, I think we have to kind of take a step back and look at that, just because context is everything. It is everything. And the context that we're operating in is a global pandemic. And again, that is going to affect everybody. It's going to affect everybody's emotional and mental state. And so we have to, that's an important piece of context to integrate into our lives.
Mm. Can you walk us through kind of maybe a day in your life right now and how you're keeping, how you're keeping structure, how you're kind of grounding yourself? What does that look like on a daily basis for you right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have two jobs because I'm a worker bee, probably like you are. So sometimes I have three. Sometimes I also teach part-time, so it depends if they need me to teach something. But right now I have two. So during the day, I oversee a mental health program, and the bulk of my work is at the residential level of care. And for anybody that doesn't know what that means, so residential is really kind of an acute level. So people sometimes confuse that with like psychiatric hospitalization, and it's not the same thing. As like being hospitalized means you're literally in the hospital, in a hospital bed, with physicians and nurses kind of round the clock there. And then once you leave, people tend to come to residential. So what it really means is you're in a residential home, or a residential facility, and you usually transfer there after being in a hospital, so then you can continue to work on the things that kind of brought you in. So we do 24-hour kind of rehabilitative care, we call it. So the guys get nutrition counseling, they do therapy, they do psychiatry, we have psychologists, they do group sessions, they do case management. It's a really, really intensive level of care. And for that reason, because they're so acute, I'm still going to work daily. We are transitioning more to telehealth, but there are some populations that we really struggle to kind of make that transition with. And I think sometimes mental health providers are, I love the Thankful for Health Heroes movement. I love it. I have so many friends that are in the medical profession. And I think sometimes mental health providers get a little bit left out because we are seen as we're the people that are kind of not necessary, or we're just in an office. Someone's on a couch and they're coming every week or so, but that's not always what it looks like, especially if you're more of an acute setting. So that's my soapbox about residential care. So we still have to run, right? Because we're an essential service. We have to help continue to provide services for these clients to help prevent them from needing to be hospitalized, or they still need care. And so thank your mental health professional if you know one, if they're working in an acute setting. So I'm still using, a lot of that obviously provides me my daily routine and structure. And I'm continuing to, eating a lot at home helps me. I'm doing yoga at home. So there's so many free yoga classes and yoga streams, walking my dog, things like that. Those are the things that help me continue to maintain structure and ground me and help me feel centered and fulfilled.
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. I'm excited that you are still able to have that. I think it's important. I believe in the same thing. It's important to try and keep some sense of structure. And you and I are definitely blessed enough to at least have work to go to. To the person that might want to reach out to someone, let's just say it's not you for this instance, right? But if they feel like they need to reach out to somebody specifically, or maybe a group, are there like some websites or some, maybe even a YouTube channel or something that you might recommend?
Yeah, so Psychology Today is probably the best directory that maybe not the best, but the most, it's very user friendly and has the most therapists on it. So, and also I want to share with the listeners that most therapists, if not all, that are at the outpatient level. So I had just shared about what residential looks like. So residential is a very intensive level of care that wouldn't be considered outpatient.
Mm-hmm.
When you get to more of the kind of clinic settings and the private practice settings, that's outpatient. Everybody is telehealth now in California. So that really expands people's options on who to see. You can see anybody in the state essentially. That hopefully that helps people. You just kind of have more options.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go on Psychology Today. You can type in, they allow you to filter insurance plan, gender, like if you prefer to see a male over a female. And they also allow you to filter certain issues like social anxiety or eating disorders. And hundreds of people will pop up. And then you can find out what their rate is and if they're taking new patients. And you can just shoot them an email or give them a call and try to set up an appointment. That's probably the most user-friendly and just kind of straight out way to find a therapist nowadays.
Yeah, that's actually really awesome. I didn't even know that. I thought Psychology Today was more of a publication than anything else.
Yeah, I think that's how it started. So it's been a magazine forever, for many years. And I think probably the last maybe 10 years or so, they've been more of a directory.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Natalie, I think that this was such a powerful interview, and I thank you so much for not just opening up about your background, but also giving us some really great tactical things that we can do to really ground ourselves and kind of get through this on an emotional and mental level. And I really appreciate that. Before I ask the last question of today, though, if somebody wants to connect with you, how can they find you?
Yeah, so the best way is just going to my website, and it's nataliezaragoza.com. It wasn't taken. Good thing, so I don't have a very common name. So all of my contact information is on there. So my phone number, you can. I have a fill-in form. So that's probably the easiest way.
Okay, perfect. And for the last question today, I definitely want to lighten the mood a little bit right now because it's such a heavy topic, even though, I do think that everything you offered was very uplifting as well. So you're obviously dealing with, a lot of stresses of your own, probably some, feelings of anxiety of your own as you're dealing with a lot of other people's emotions and helping them guide through that. So at the end of the day, when you're sitting with your boyfriend or something like that, what is your Netflix guilty pleasure?
Okay, so I love Netflix. So I really do. I didn't like it as much until maybe about a year ago. Well, I think they got a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they started putting out really good content.
Mm-hmm.
So Ozark right now is something that I'm definitely watching. I wind down. This is more of Patrick, my boyfriend, wind down. He loves The Office. So we watch that at night a lot. I'm trying to think of. Oh, I watched Little Fires Everywhere. That was
Little Fires Everywhere?
Yeah, it's actually a novel.
Mm.
And they made a TV series, and so that's a Hulu one. But I binge watched in like 2 days. So
That's
that
amazing.
was probably my most recent guilty experience, guilt-inducing experience. But it was really good. So
I love that. Thank you so much. To the listener, thank you so much for your time and attention. We really appreciate it. If you loved the episode, we would dig a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it that much, feel free to stick it to us, but subscribe anyway, because we're going to have a ton of incredible people just like Dr. Natalie Zaragoza back on the show. Thank you again, Natalie.
thank you so much.